Are you excited?
I'm so pumped. I'm so excited that y'all are here. Thank you so much for coming out and like thinking of us.
We'll do the important work. We're just trying to get it out there a little bit.
She does the important work. I'm just here for show.
Feel free to hype her up too.
Yeah. Never. I would never do something like that, actually.
Well, my name is Tigra-Lee Campbell. I am from Lloyd. I've been here since 2018. I moved from Edmonton, Alberta, where I left a history of addiction and being unhoused there, and I came to Lloyd and I got clean and sober. So I'm in my 7th year of recovery, and my pronouns are she, they.
She has much more to say and has much more interesting stories, and she's being humble right now. So my name is Brad Gallimore. I'm the other co-founder of Lloydminster Vermillion for Equity. I'm from Vermillion, Alberta, and I also moved there from Edmonton. I also left behind a life of addiction and wonderful, wonderful, smart decisions that I always made. And even the outreach and what we do now, if you had told me 4 years ago I would be doing this, I would have slapped you and laughed at you because there's no way I would have ever even considered it. And it's amazing the journey that we've been on to get, not only for us two to get here, but for this whole group and everything that we've started. So I think that's pretty incredible. And it was all her.
Why don't you tell the story of the Lloydminster Vermillion for Equity?
It's going to be a 2-part series.
It's a 2-part series.
Yeah.
So in little Vermillion, Alberta, after the death of George Floyd, I genuinely believed that not only should we have a Black Lives Matter rally in Vermillion, but that it would be well received and people would be down. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. I admittedly, I received threats and got called every name you've ever heard of. And admittedly, I didn't respond well either. I wasn't like, oh, you have your opinion. It actually didn't help things, it turns out. But it got a lot of attention. I think people talk about how it was one of the most commented on posts in any Vermillion page ever. And while drowning in these comments, a lovely person found me.
Yeah, he was floundering, literally floundering. And there was a George Floyd protest in Lloyd that I had went to, and there was a lot of supporters there, and I thought we can't just do this one time, and there should be something in the smaller towns around us and what's happening. So I was checking out what's happening in Vermillion, and I saw his post, and he's like, if anyone wants to come and help me, and I was like, I'll be there. I have to go to Edmonton this weekend, but I'll be back and I'll come and help you with this protest. So that's how LVE came together. Was from that one protest, and we knew that systemic racism is such a huge issue, especially out here in rural Alberta, and having a protest is good, for amplification and for awareness. It's really great, but we knew that we wanted to create more concrete change. So we knew that we would have to do more. So we started doing roundtables once a week in Vermillion, and then we did them alternating, where one was in Vermillion and one was in Lloyd. It was a rocky start. It was a very, very rocky start. But so we started holding that. We helped out with MMIW Day, Indigenous Day, just different events. But also that summer, it was one of the hottest summers we had had. And we decided to go out with water and a cooler and ice. So we started walking around once a week with water, and then we were like, we should do snacks. So we started doing snacks, and then we were like, we should do sandwiches. Yep. So we started doing sandwiches, and all we had was 3 coolers, and
not even the wagon yet.
We didn't have a wagon yet, and we would just walk around the downtown core, and especially during the lockdown, it was really hard for unhoused people to access just the basic necessity, which is water. So that's why we decided to go out and offer water. And it just took off from there. Street Team took off from there. And once that winter hit, it was really hard to get around in the winter, especially with our coolers. So
cooler.
We reached out to Tyler, and we asked him if we could utilize the space during the winter. And so we did that first winter. The next summer, we were back outside at City Hall We're really passionate about meeting people where they're at. And a lot of people, especially for various reasons, whether you have social anxiety, whether you're coming down from drugs, like you don't like to be around a lot of people, you don't like to be in buildings. And especially since this is a recovery center, some might think that we're pushing recovery. So we aim to just meet people where they're at. So this summer we would have been back outside. However, there was we were trying to implement a community fridge, and we didn't know where that was going to be. We still don't know where that's going to be yet. So we kind of wanted to do street team where the fridge was going to be, but seeing as how we don't have that, plus we added like clothing and a shower service to our outreach, it made it really difficult for us to go outside on Sundays. But we do have Thursday nights where we're mobile and we do go out into the community. We're on foot and we meet people where they're at. Yeah. Well, car and foot.
Car and
foot, yeah.
Sometimes wagon.
Sometimes wagon, yeah. But with the amount of stuff like we'll do a hot meal, we do bagged lunches, we do hygiene, socks, underwear, and harm reduction. So it's with the amount of stuff we have to bring with us, it's kind of hard to do wagons anymore.
It has to be cars. Like I think even last week we were 2 cars. So
yeah.
No, what is harm reduction?
Oh.
Yeah, harm reduction is substance use equipment. So bats, straight pipes, sharps. We provide the substance use equipment to help keep them safe while they're using. Like you can't stop anyone from using, you can't stop that behavior, but we can keep them safe.
Yep. And then we also have, we make sure we hand out the testing strips and of course the naloxone kits because I think in the last 3 weeks there has been almost an astronomical number of poisonings, and even on our Thursday street team we were naloxoning someone. So we make sure that you know, if you take a bat, you're taking a naloxone, even if it's to humor me and you're gonna ditch it in the garbage, humor me.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to make sure to do, because like Tigra said, people are gonna use drugs and it might as well be safe. Hello and welcome to naloxone basic training. By basic training we mean we're just showing you what's in the kit, what they do and what they're for. So this is your basic naloxone injection kit. You can get them at any pharmacy. They should train you when you get there, and if they don't, say something. So inside each of these kits, you have 3 naloxone bottles. You can call it Narcan, naloxone, whichever makes you feel better. Your alcohol rubs, 3 syringes, and then of course gloves, and then a device for resuscitation. Keep your lips safe. There is also an instruction booklet. If you can follow the instruction booklet, and you need to follow the instruction booklet, follow the instruction booklet. So basically what you're gonna do is you're using one of these bottles. The lids literally flip off. Very easy to puncture. You want to do it upside down, let gravity do the work, and obviously do not puncture the needle too far or you're just going to be drawing air. So what you're going to do is you're going to push the needle as far as it'll go without clicking, insert the needle and start to draw to about the 1 milligram spot. Push out any air. Because it's going into thighs and not into arteries or veins, you don't have to worry about air bubbles. You're not going to kill anybody. Try to get a little bit out anyways. And then you will want to do a bit of a stabbing motion, because odds are you have to go through jeans or other pairs of pants. And then you're going to push the syringe right until it clicks. And then at that point, even the sharps part will click back in, makes it super easy for disposal, makes it super easy for just dealing with, and you don't have to worry about getting poked after you help save somebody's life. If you are a human being, you should have this on your person at all times. You should carry it with you everywhere you go. It will make a difference. It could save a friend's life, it could save a random's life, and it will save a life. So what you want to do is make sure you're carrying it with you at all times. You're practiced and you're confident in your abilities to Narcan someone.
So the injectable naloxone you can't leave in your car. It does lose potency if it freezes. Nasal naloxone is different because the formula is different. You can freeze nasal naloxone without the formula losing its potency.
Yeah, essentially it doesn't freeze.
Yeah, the nasal naloxone is just so much better. Yeah.
But it's because it's so much more expensive.
Yeah,
right?
like one one box of nasal naloxone is like $50. Or no, 100.
It's expensive. Because these, even to produce these full in the kit is like $30.
Yeah. So they're more expensive. The formula is different, and it's bigger. Like one thing of nasal naloxone is 5 milligrams,
Yeah.
whereas these are only 2 milligrams each. And the testing strips are really important too because benzos, like you can't naloxone benzos. So if somebody is overdosing from benzos, then we can't naloxone them. So it's super important to know what's in the dope. And then we also do sharps cleanup too. So when we're out on Thursdays, when we're hitting the regular spots, we'll clean up that area too and dispose of them safely.
Heck yeah.
Did you see it growing so much when you first started?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, literally, it was me, Tigra, and sometimes her daughter, and then
Yeah.
these wonderful women from, I think they call themselves the Smile Group. I'm sure that stands for something like an acronym. I don't know what it is, but it does stand for something. And they actually started donating like bag lunches to us at first because they were stoked about what we were doing. We have volunteers who have been around almost since the beginning now that continue to come to Street Team and help us out and like have gotten a lot more vocal. Like we all start off as quiet, antisocial people.
Yeah.
And then we slowly actually like start working up to it. So the volunteers that have been around longer have gotten really good at telling me off, and that's been really beneficial to this group.
Yeah, and when we first started, we were only serving maybe between 10 and 20 people. Like, we really had to build the trust with the community, but like you saw today, like we're serving a lot more than 10 to 20 people. So not only has just the community itself grown, or they're just more willing to access the service, our volunteer base has really grown too, and the amount of community support that we get in clothing donations, item donations, food donations, monetary donations has just grown exponentially.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know what the Street Team is, what would you tell them about it?
Ooh. It's great.
It's great.
We do like good stuff and stuff.
So Street Team, it's barrier-free, judgment-free access to service. We believe that everyone deserves the right to dignity and respect. And regardless if you're clean or sober or not, you deserve access to service. When I was in Edmonton, we had the dope truck. So you could call the dope truck and they would come and meet you where you were at, and they would give you harm reduction, condoms, a bag lunch if they had them, and they saw you as a person first. And when you're in like active use, sometimes, at least for myself, that's what I craved, to be seen as a person before I was an addict. And that's what we try to do. We aim to do. That's one of our missions, is to see people as people first. And yeah.
That was really good.
How important is it to build that trust with those you work with?
It's essential. I mean, especially for people who are deep in use or, just genuinely don't want to talk to people. It's it's so easy to be like, yeah, let's just bring some sandwiches out to the community. You have to be doing it over and over and consistently working at just having conversations even, and just seeing them. And if they don't want to have conversations, respecting that too, right? Like that's how you earn the trust, and it's where we are now would not have happened without that.
Yeah. And a lot of the marginalized peoples, they don't feel they have trust in their government, their home life. These systems that were put in place to protect them have failed them in unimaginable ways. So trust is extremely important. We've built a lot of connections. So Tyler and I was kind of saying this earlier. We have a longer history than a lot of people realize. We were both in active use in Edmonton, and when I don't know how we both ended up here. It was just one day I saw him in Safeway and I had a panic attack. I was like, my past is following me. I don't know what's happening. I gotta go home. People are following me. So I wanted to go to Smart Recovery as well. And I was like, okay, let me call the facilitator. I just want to check it out. And who was it? Tyler. So I was like, okay, at least he's clean and sober now. So we had invited him out to round tables. And then once we needed an inside space, we just asked him if we would use it. And he is also passionate about outreach. He's passionate about the unhoused community and recovery and addiction as well. So he was a really great connection that we had made, and we're very, very thankful for him. We also have a really great connection with the Lloydminster Regional Health Foundation. When we're a nonprofit, we're not a charity. But if people do want to donate to us and receive that charitable tax receipt, they can head to their website, and we have a spot on their drop-down menu so they can make a donation there. And then the Lloydminster Regional Health Foundation will issue that tax receipt on our behalf. So and Stephanie Monroe is awesome. I will plug her. She's such an awesome person all around.
Absolutely. And then we regularly receive donations from the Olive Tree.
Yeah.
We've been actually working with, like, I don't know how to describe his job. It's like city planner manager.
FCSS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not that, but Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick's with FCSS.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. And then we've been meeting with town people, and
Yeah.
it's just growing. And then in Vermilion, like I have a very good connection with the food bank there and the Hearts and Hands, which is about the epitome of all of the services in Vermilion. But we're getting more. We're working on it. I promise. It's gonna get better.
The Olive Tree is like, they do a weekly meal 3 times a week. They also do food rescue from the grocery stores here. So every Saturday they provide us a hamper as well. So like some of our snacks is from them. They'll give us, it's different every week, but so they help with with food support. We also get the Cobb's bread end of day pickup on Tuesdays. So we use that to make our sandwiches. And another one of our volunteers has a couple family members that she will bring bread to as well. And then Patrick works for the city. He works for FCSS. He does a lot of like planning. So right now they're doing a housing needs assessment. Before they did what was the assessment before?
I thought it was still.
I think it was just a needs assessment,
Yeah.
Lloyd's needs assessment. So they've come here and they've interviewed people from the unhoused as well to get their input, which I find is so awesome, to have the city actually listening to the marginalized community, and not only just like, here's a piece of paper, fill it out, but they came and took the time to come down and make sure that their voices were heard too. Yep. They'll be doing the same with the housing needs assessment as well. So we have a pretty good relationship with them. And then for Vermilion, it's a rough community, like great community, but also rough community. The change there,
it's the the old boys club. So not much has changed since they were growing up, and they don't want things to change since they've been growing up, and it's a little difficult to get around that. But like I was mentioning, the Hearts and Hands is this wonderful older woman all by herself, collects donations throughout the year. And once a week, you can go to the Christina's Home Furnishing into the basement and pick out any clothes you need. No questions asked. It's all free, and that's once a week. I believe it's still by appointment. It was just during the COVID thing, but I think they kind of kept that just to be able to like know who's coming in. But it's literally, hey, we're gonna be here this time. Okay, see you later. And they're wonderful service. So
they do mitts and hats in the winter too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like any clothing you need. So that's why they call it Hearts and Hands, right? Because it started off as like mostly gloves and toques. So.
Yeah. And we do one multicultural event there every year.
Heck yeah.
For the last 3 years, we got the Alberta Culture Days grant. So we hosted an event called Vermilion Culture Fest. So we have a lineup of performers, and then we have vendors, we have a food truck. Our second day is dedicated to Indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
The last 2 years we had a speaker in the morning, and then we had a blanket exercise in the afternoon. This year we're dedicating it to small workshops.
Small workshops.
Yeah, so like moccasin making, beading, dream catchers, things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's our contribution to Vermilion right now.
That's how we're getting people together, and it is like I had mentioned before, like that we got off to a rocky start in Vermilion, and this is in no way a slight at Vermilion. It's a great community. There's a reason I still live there. I find that this event has made a difference in reaching people and being like, hey, you know what, like maybe this guy and this group isn't just yelling at us for whatever, right? Like they care about this. It's a general thing, and it's not a protest, right? This is come enjoy a performance, some food, and then more food.
And we did Black History Month there too this
heck
year. We
yes,
did a
yes.
Black History Month trivia event, which was pretty cool. And we'll be doing that forever now.
Forever. Shout out to the library.
Yeah, shout out to the library.
How important is it to have awareness of the current and historical traumas and struggles that BIPOC communities have faced when you're working with the houseless?
That is a really good question. I feel like it's important because you're able to provide culturally appropriate, trauma-informed care, basically, and just have a better understanding of how you can serve the person better. Yeah.
Intergenerational trauma is a real thing, and
Yeah.
we can't expect to help somebody without addressing that first.
Yeah. I also feel like with my own story too, like both my parents are still in active addiction, and like I was born addicted to drugs. So I understand like the intergenerational trauma and how what happened to our parents is also passed down to us. And while like some of my own behaviors, I wasn't even able to understand them until I started to do that inner work, the inner child work, the shadow work, all that hard work. It wasn't until then, when I realized that, you know, like some of these behaviors stem from my past, or some of these behaviors are because my inner child really needs love right now. So I feel like with that understanding, even of myself, I'm able to further support the community. And it also really helps with my recovery, like that, giving back to the community and doing the service work that's part of recovery.
What advice would you give to allies to be a better ally?
Just start, honestly. And like, don't interject yourself. Don't say, I'm here to do this. Like, just show up. There's so many events and things you can show up. Set up some tables. You know, put some tablecloths on tables and just ask, hey, like, can I volunteer? Don't ask. And any question you have for Black and Indigenous people, you can Google it. I promise. So when you're sitting there, you're like, oh, like, I just really want to, just Google it. There's 19 books that'll pop up. I can send you 19 books. And most importantly, that allies need to remember, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna do wrong. You're gonna upset somebody. It's all about accountability. You simply, right? It's, yes, this was wrong. I know that. I will do better in the future. Because if you do it again, you didn't learn anything. So you're gonna mess up, continue to mess up, and then just be accountable to yourself. And then be accountable to that accountability. If you say you're going to change, change. If you're going to do better, do better. And it's honestly just a matter of like putting yourself out there, but not in a way that, you know, you don't present yourself like, I'm here to change things. It's, I'm here to set up some tables and then maybe we can talk about other things, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and just work your way up. It's not hard. If people will see you as an ally, and if you're a good ally, they'll let you be a part of things. I even get to do interviews, like.
And it's not a self-proclaimed, like, I'm an ally.
Yeah, if you ever say the words, I'm an ally, you're probably not an ally. I'm just putting it out there. Anyways, but yeah, that's the best thing. And most importantly, if you're not standing close enough to get hit by the rocks being thrown at Black and Indigenous people, then you're not an ally.
What advice would you give to someone looking to sober up?
Ooh, don't hang out with me. No, it's progress, not perfection, right? You know, if you relapse or whatever, like, don't beat yourself up. It's not the worst thing. There are plenty worse things. Trust me. But it's just progress, not perfection. Set goals for yourself. Don't try to be, right? Don't be like, I'm going to be completely cold turkey by next Wednesday. Be like, hey, I'm going to cut down by next Wednesday, and then go from there, right? Start slow. Progress, not perfection.
Yeah. I think, yeah, what you said was really good. Progress, not perfection. And to be honest with yourself and with those around you as well. Build that support system, however that looks like to you. Nobody has to recover alone, and you shouldn't have to. There's a really great community. Find a recovery center, go to meetings if that works for you. There's a lot of resources.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and recovery, I feel like doing the work that I'm doing now, I've looked at recovery in a different way. I know that a lot of times when people hear recovery, they just think of abstinence. But recovery can mean a plethora of different things. It doesn't necessarily mean abstinence for all. You could be, recovering from having a pretty crappy routine. You could be recovering from mental health issues, making sure that you're on top of going to appointments. Like recovery is recovery looks different for everybody. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to someone later on in their recovery journey that's struggling with their sobriety?
Ooh, you go first.
Yeah, part of recovery is identifying triggers, and that the recovery takes work. It's not just like I'm going to quit and that's it. Your triggers, you should identify them, and they're always going to be changing. So making sure to revisit your triggers, making sure that you have a plan put in place for when you do feel triggered, whether that's going to a meeting, speaking to a sponsor, speaking to a close friend or family that you trust. And then, why are you triggered? Are you, halt? Are you hungry?
Yeah,
are you angry? Are you, what's the L? Lonely?
Yeah.
Are you tired? Like what, identifying what happened on why you're triggered, and bring it back to the basics. Like I was just highly triggered like last month, and it was super weird. In 7 years of recovery, I haven't been triggered like that for a long time. I was having using dreams. I was making plans. It was super weird. So I just brought it back to the basics, 1 second at a time, 1 minute at a time. I was like, Kate, I'm just gonna stay sober today, I'll use tomorrow. And then tomorrow came, Kate, I'm gonna stay sober today, I'll use tomorrow. So it's a toolkit. You're building a toolkit so that when you are triggered or you feel like using, you can access these tools now to help you stay on the right path.
That was really good. Mm-hmm. And then just surrounding yourself with the right people. Right? Like if you're in recovery and you feel like you're being triggered a lot, and then you look at who you're spending time with, maybe don't hang out with those people for a little while, right?
People, places, and things.
Places, and things, right? There's just certain aspects, certain places that it's going to trigger you. So just be sure of who you're surrounding yourself with and where you're doing it, and just one day at a time. Yeah.
And honesty, honesty is the biggest part. I feel like being honest with yourself so that you can be honest with those around you, regardless if you're using or not. I feel like that part, it's just so you know how to help yourself, but also so the people around you know how they can better support you.
Absolutely.
For those in the community who have never been involved with helping the houseless, how can they start?
No matter where you are, there's probably a group doing something. 90% of our ideas we steal from Water Warriors in Edmonton. I won't even lie about it. Tigra will be like, that's a great idea. Yeah, it was totally mine, 100% original, definitely not taken from other groups. But even we had a volunteer here today who, this was her first time working with unhoused people, and all she did was reach out to us and ask, hey, can I help? Yeah. And that was a big difference. And first of all, I was like, heck yes, as many hands as I can get. I just put her right to work. But no, I think it is. I know it's funny, we just talked about how it's not as simple as just asking to help. But in this scenario, it really is. Hey, how can I help? And that's it. Getting started, we had no experience. We had never done this. We walked around with a cooler full of water bottles.
Yeah.
So, even the term how to get started seems so strange to me now, because that's what we did. We just kind of got started. So, but there's a group. I guarantee wherever you are, there's a group. There's people who are doing this. They might be later in the night, and if you're not comfortable with that, that's okay, because there's usually other stuff you can do. You don't have to be somebody who's out on the street at 2 a.m. handing out sandwiches. Grant work, updating websites, anything technology related, because I'm terrible at it. So just this is one of those things where I will say it's simple to get started. What you should focus on is, will you continue to do it?
Yeah.
It's not lip service. It's not performative. We get a lot of people who are like, oh, I'd love to do this. They show up twice, take some pictures for Instagram, and that's the last we see of them, right?
Yeah.
So it's as much as it is about getting started, it's committing to continue to do it, because you can't do it just once.
Well, and work smarter, not harder. Definitely find what is going on in your own community so that you can help. And I think a really hot topic right now in a lot of mutual aid groups is sustainability. And if you're going to start something from scratch, the draw on your finances, the draw on your physical body, the draw on your mental health, like it's not going to be sustainable on your own. So the better part would be to find an organization that already has something ongoing and seeing how you can help support them. And if there's not, that might happen as well, then you can think of whether you're or not you have the capacity to start something. But when we come back to that trust piece, we wouldn't have the trust with the community like we do if we weren't consistent.
Yeah.
And that consistency piece is really important.
And just to finish that, even if there isn't something in your town, you can reach out. Like, you don't have to start from scratch, right? You can reach out to these other groups and say, hey, how did you get started? What did you do? And that's something you can transition. And you'll find after a couple of weeks too, like what you thought was the most important, the community is going to tell you what's important.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you what they need. So like we started thinking, oh, like it's got to be water, it's got to be water. Now sometimes we forget water.
Yeah.
You know, not on this day, I promise, but like a lot of the time, like we will forget water. It's like, oh, because that's not the list of concerns that we've been receiving, right? But it's funny because that's how we started.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, there's a lot of organizations that are more than willing to help you. We got a lot of help from Water Warriors, the egg. Yeah, we got a lot of help from them, and yeah, we're super grateful for them. So there's many organizations that have the information out there, or they're willing to provide you with the information if you just contact them.
Including us.
What are your strict boundaries in this work?
Oh, yeah. So,
We're so bad at boundaries.
you're asking the wrong people. Take the day off if you need to. If you're not feeling it, if you have an anxiety or whatever you're feeling, don't go out. You know, call in on a Sunday for street team and just say, hey, I'm not going to make it. But like making sure that you're taking those days for yourself and you're being honest with yourself. If you do it 4 weeks in a row, 2 days, and you get to the end and you're just exhausted, but then you're still going to go out on Sunday, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Or the community.
Or the community, right? Like, you know, especially if you're tense or you're aggravated or anything, like that's not helpful in a lot of situations. Yeah, that's just not helpful. So it's setting boundaries mostly for yourself and your mental health. As far as boundaries with like the unhoused community, besides sleeping at our house, we don't really have many. I think I drove someone here today. Like,
Yeah.
So but that's, again, that didn't start like that either, right? When we first started, it was like, hey, like, let's, you know, we left our cars in different places. We left our wallets in our cars, right? Like there was certain things that we did, but now, but it's because, again, we have that trust with the community that we're not too concerned about a lot of things. So it's more about personal boundaries, and your boundaries may be way different than mine. Like, I don't care. I will go and hug every single person I meet. You might not want to get hugs from people. You might, right? So it's setting that, but also within the community, right? So don't just say, oh, I don't like being hugged. Tell the community, you know, like I don't like being hugged. And I guarantee you they will respond to that. I have had more pleasant experiences with the unhoused community than a lot of other communities in this world. So
Yeah.
it's everybody always has these, what do you call them, like stereotypes and these
biases.
Yeah, and these notions, but like literally I don't think we've ever had like a major scenario of any kind because we've earned that trust in the community. So it's just make sure you take your personal health days, and then any other personal boundaries set up. It's just, that's such a weird question for us.
It is. It's actually, setting boundaries has been something I've been working on really over the last few years. Saying no, and it's not just with mutual aid though. It's my own personal boundaries. Saying no is really hard, but it's taken practice. Setting boundaries takes practice, and in the beginning it feels super crappy. Like it didn't feel good for me. I thought that people might think I was pushing them away, and some people might think that like you're pushing them away, or you don't love them, or you love them less, when that's not the issue. You're just trying to keep yourself and that person safe. So saying no and knowing when to say no, you know, and no is a full-on sentence. Like sometimes it doesn't need to be backed up by a reason, but knowing when you're too tired, knowing when you already had 5 other things to do that day, you just don't have the capacity. Or sometimes, like, I get calls in the middle of the night, which are really, really hard to turn down, because you never know what that person is going through. But I myself have 3 kids, 2 of them are super young. So knowing, like, okay, you actually have to get up early in the morning. This is not something that you'd be able to address. You have to find other alternative services that you can suggest to them at that time. But yeah, setting boundaries was a really hard one, especially when it was just me and Brad. Like, there were some weeks where I'm like, I can't continue. I am burnt out. I am not doing anyone a service. I'm definitely not being able to service or provide service to the unhoused. So maybe we just not have a street team today. And there were times I cried. I feel terrible. I am not saying I'm doing what I wanted to do. Everyone's gonna, they're gonna think we suck, but it was just taking the time that we needed in order to be the best versions of ourselves so that we can provide the service that we know and the quality of service that we know that we can.
Yeah, it's always better to have 1 good week than 3 really crappy weeks.
Yeah. I'm happy that it's just starting to be a topic of conversation here, like with accessible housing, because it's a huge issue. Even here, like, it's a massive issue here. And like, I really, really hope they implement a housing first model. Like, every time we talk about it, I suggest the housing first model, just because, like, it's tried, it's proven to work. The housing first model, the first time I heard about it was like last year, the year before, and it's like a Finnish model. So it was done in Finland first, I guess. Like, that's what my understanding is. But it was also, it's been utilized here in Calgary, in Edmonton, and in BC, I believe. So basically, what the model is housing everyone first, and then with the intention that the recovery piece will just fall into place. So you're housed regardless if you're ready to be housed or not. And it has an 80% success rate. So people who are housed continue to stay housed for over a year. Yeah. And then the recovery piece is like recovery however that it looks to that individual. And you still have access to service, but the service is off-site. So it's not like institutionalized where you get that wraparound service. Like, on-site, you still get wraparound service, but it's not directly there. So the recovery can look like life skills training, or some sort of, like, any type of training that would better themselves, or like a treatment center if they want to go to treatment for addiction or mental health issues. So yeah, that's a little bit about the housing first model. But yeah, I feel like there's so many vacant buildings. First of all, there's so many vacant houses here in Lloyd. Like, we have multiple, like, motels that are up for sale right now that would be perfect to implement the housing first model. And I mean, the data is there. The data proves that it works. So all we need to do is invest. And when we talk about housing first, one of the things that gets brought up the most is, where are we going to get the money from? I feel like if we taxed corporations more, and we raise their low rate from 8% to 12%, which is still would be the lowest in the country, then we could take that and invest it into other social services like a housing first model.
I think it just speaks tremendously to the effect that security plays in someone's ability to recover.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because, like, getting clean and sober on the streets is one of the hardest things to do, especially through the winter. And you're not thinking of getting clean, you're thinking of when I can use next, or when can I drink next, because first of all, I'm satisfied. Second of all, like, I don't know when I'm going to be able to eat or sleep, or, sleep next, right? So getting clean and sober on the streets is really hard, and that security piece is very important. And then you can start to identify, like, other needs, like, is this person irrational or emotional, or do they have another issue like hypothyroidism where that makes their moods erratic, or are they diabetic, that also makes their moods erratic. So it's like the recovery piece can come from like a sense of wellness and not just abstinence.
Oh, okay. So how are you supposed to know what other issues need to be dealt with if there's this massive barrier
Yeah.
in the way? Oh,
Yeah.
mutual aid.
Mutual aid? Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
tell us about mutual aid.
Yeah. Mutual aid, kind of the definition is in the name. Like you have a mutual understanding. It's not a charity. We're not like rich people trying to hand out to the poor and say, here's what you get, basically. Like it's a mutual understanding that there are there's a certain demographic in the community that needs more, right? And especially when we bring it back to equity, giving everybody what they need so that they have a level playing field, which is extremely hard. So yeah, a mutual understanding and a mutual benefit. And it's like it can look like many different things. Like the amount of times in the winter I've come home to my driveway shoveled, or like Kenny, he was here today. He'll come by and he'll mow my lawn or something like that. And it's just like giving back to one another in areas that they know are needed. So yeah.
Wow, that's cool. I saw like a post once about like if communities come together more and a neighborhood only needs one lawnmower.
It's so true. It's so true. And when the most vulnerable are taken care of in the community, you know that everyone is taken care of. And it could not be like closest to the truth, Yeah.
For those who aren't involved in helping with mutual aid, how can they start?
Okay, it kind of goes back into the other question as well. I first would find out like what's happening in your community, and it's about community collaborating, right? So find out what's happening, whether there's a mutual aid group. I know a lot of churches also do like a lunch or something. Churches they're so difficult because there are some that have like an adverse reaction to churches. And when we started, we had, like there's a meeting once a month at the church, and I had such a hard time going because the trust is not there at all. But with that being said, a lot of churches do some sort of mutual aid work. So speaking to them, speaking to another group that might be doing it is a first start. But I think the most basic of starts that somebody can have in mutual aid is just talking to people, like getting out on the streets, going into like your downtown core where a lot of unhoused or vulnerable people go, and just having those conversations and not asking intrusive questions either, but being genuine with what you're speaking about and not, offending them or scaring them away. So yeah, I think the first part of mutual aid is having a conversation, getting out into your community and just seeing who's there and being a part of the experience.
How has your sense of community grown through your work here?
It has grown a lot, not only with the unhoused, but with other agencies as well, and because we are very vocal on social media, the community is more aware of what we actually do as well and how we are actually helping. Mm-hmm.
How do you go about donation callouts?
We do a lot of our donation callouts on social media. Another part of what we do is like food security relief. So somebody might contact us and say, hey, like I'm really short on food, or I don't have any food, like can you help us? So when I get that, I will get an itemized list of what they want, and essentially it is, I tell them to put everything on there. Like if in a perfect world, like if your fridges were stocked, like what would you want? So I get that itemized list from them, and then I put them on posters and I put them out in our group, or And then I put them also in our community groups as well, like community Facebook groups. And then I get as much support as I can, whether that's food items themselves or monetary donations. And then depending on how emergent the need is, I'll leave the post up for like a day or two. And then then we'll fill in the gaps. So I'll head to the grocery store, I'll buy the rest of what we don't get, and then I'll drop it off. And most of the people, if not all, that do request food are on social assistance, they're single mothers, or they're just in between like getting paid and their next hamper day. So we'll try and fill in that gap for them. So that's how we do donation callouts for that. Or if we're trying to raise money, we'll do the donation call out on social media too. And then we'll also always plug our email where they can send e-transfers to. And then for those that are looking for the charitable tax receipt, we'll put the Lloydminster Regional Health Foundation website on there and tell them how they can navigate that.
What sort of impact does this have on the community members when they receive this support from their fellow community members?
It's awesome to see, like, you show up there with all of these bags of groceries, and some people are just in shock, like they can't be there, and they're always so humble about it too, and like, oh, I will pay this forward, or I want to come out and volunteer, like people who don't have much are willing to give what they have back into the community. And that's the whole point of what we do is, to show that you don't have to be rich to support. You don't have to have a lot of finances to support. If we all come together, we can make it happen, and nobody should be food insecure or housing insecure, or if in our communities.
How does that impact the work you do?
That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever had that question asked. Honestly, like, I don't know, like, I don't even like attention. So it's like, it makes me feel good, but at the end of the day, I know that I'm giving back, and I know that I've been a person in that situation that's needed support, monetarily, with food, with bill payment. Like, I've been a person in that position, and I've received help, so I just feel like I'm doing my service in giving back.
It's a whole other level of giving back when you do it for no reward, whether it's monetary or emotional or gratification. Mm-hmm. It's awesome to see.
Yeah.
Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Okay, so our logo, it's pretty complex. So it has the medicine wheel on it. It also has our name, Lloydminster and Vermillion for Equity. It also has the black fist, as well as the rainbow feather, a peace sign, and the Métis sign. One of the original members, when we had our protest, he was the one he drew this, actually. And then when we started making t-shirts, the company that printed our t-shirts digitized it for us and sent us the digital copy, so thank you. But yeah, we wanted to make sure that when people view the logo, they understand that we come from a place of inclusivity, regardless of age, gender, if you have a disability, anything like that. And it's also a source of conversation, right? And so we don't ever have people that are in the middle. It's like either I love it or I hate it. And usually the reason people hate it is because of the black fist, because of the Black Power movement. And there are some people that feel like the Black Power movement was a source of Black supremacy. And so that's been an interesting conversation to have, and it really does bring up the need for the conversation about anti-Blackness. And regardless of what community you're in, anti-Blackness is so prevalent in all communities. So regardless of a person says, you know, like, this makes me feel uncomfortable, or I really don't like that, it is a symbol of further communication. So even when they're saying, like, I don't like that, I don't like it, the logo is doing exactly what it should be doing, is sparking that conversation as to, okay, well, why does Black power make you feel uncomfortable? You know, that's a lot to unpack in itself. So yeah, that's a bit about our logo and how it came to be.
Thank you for sharing. You
Yeah.
can dwell into that conversation a little more if you're comfortable. If you'd
With
like
Black
to.
power?
Yeah, go if you'd like to.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's always an interesting conversation, because when people hear Black power, depends on where you are in your fragility levels. I feel like people think that something is going to be taken from them, you know, but historically, we've seen time and time again when Black people come together and we build things for ourselves, whether that's communities or wealth or you know, just other areas, I guess, it's taken away, you know, or we've seen it, it's very prevalent, like even here with Africville, you know, like that their houses were demolished and their lands were taken away from them, and there still has not been reparations for that to this day. Like, those peoples are still fighting for what they had. So it's not a conversation of let me take from you. It's let us build and let us catch up to the generational wealth that white people have had since the beginning of colonization, since the transatlantic slave trade. And it does bring up like anti-Blackness in other communities, whether it's the Indigenous community, the Black community itself. Colorism is such an issue. In our Asian communities, like anti-Blackness is so prevalent. And you know, we hear of like skin lightening creams and things like that. So yeah, it's not about taking away from whiteness. It's just building in a community that feels safe for us. Mm-hmm.
And that's when equity comes into play.
Yeah, definitely equity comes into play there. Fun fact, I don't know, I just learned this recently, which blew my mind. So when slavery was abolished, the slave owners were paid reparations, and the last reparations payment to slaveholding families was made in 2015. My mind was blasted. Not one single cent has been paid to Black people for, or their, like, either the slaves or the descendant of slaves. So, you know, colonizers have been building generational wealth from the beginning of colonization. And at every turn when Black people or Black communities or Indigenous communities try and build something for themselves, it's decimated, or they're systematically oppressed, so they cannot get ahead. So building these communities are super important, not so that we have safe spaces to thrive in, but that we can catch up, which is, it sounds surreal almost, it sounds bigger than myself. But when I think of equity, that's, you know, how I think of it.
Well, I think Canada especially is super disconnected in terms of having those conversations, because from my understanding, Canada had slaves too, right? And I remember telling people that when I first found out, and they're like, no, we didn't. Like, we got like in a heated argument where I was like, we did. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean we did it? We did.
Yeah.
They're like, no, we didn't. I was like,
look it up, man. Like, all it takes is a quick Google search. Canada had 200 years of slavery. And not only that, but that's what the government, or however you want to state it, that's how like the first forms of control started, because Indigenous people held slaves, but Black people were given land. So that was essentially how they could start the control, by pitting us against each other, you know? So yeah, and that was a topic of conversation even in my child's school, because they were teaching this slavery unit using a book that had horrible words in it that I would not even say, and the book was written by a white person. So when I challenged it, I was like, you know, you want to teach about slavery, why not teach about the 200 years of slavery that Canada had? You know, why are we only sticking to the Underground Railroad? Like, why are there only a few narratives that we're only going to stick to? And why are we using a book with the N-word written by a white person, read by a white person? Like, it was unreal to me. And I asked if it had ever been challenged before, and they said no.
Must have been tough to take that space up and to have made that noise. And
It was hard, but also, like, I feel really proud of my daughter because she was the one that brought it to my attention, and she was the one. I really wanted the meeting to happen as well, but you could tell that she really wanted it to happen as well, and she demanded that she was also in the room as well. So it was very interesting. There was a lot of emotion there. I did bring in support. My friend Ben, I asked him to be there as well. Just so they could see that, like, Black people were not a monolith. Like, Indigenous people, they're not a monolith, you know? Like, it's like to have, like, my biracial voice heard and his Black voice heard, I felt was super important. And then for Summer to be there as well, my daughter, and to have her experience and her voice heard in there it was very powerful, and it did. Change came from it, and that's all that we could have asked for was, you know, like, we don't always do the right things, you know, some things are archaic, but let's get some change happening, and that's what happened.
how hopeful does it make you when you see that next generation, specifically your daughter, not settling for anything but change?
It is really awesome. Her and her group of friends, like, the best kids ever, and that is, like, that's why I do what I do, is for her and her siblings to be able to know that they have a voice, know that they can use their voice, and how it can be done strategically. And to sometimes you are afraid, like, sometimes I'm really afraid, but I have my supports that I can lean on, and that it'll be okay, you know? It's definitely interesting, yeah. They're little activists in themselves. Like, my baby was born during COVID. So, and she, like, came out with her little fist up. It was real cute.
Oh, it's awesome to hear about your daughter making all that noise.
Yeah, she's definitely, like, coming into her own and having her own voice, and I'm really, really proud of her.
It must be hard, though, to tackle the narrative of the angry woman, like the stereotype.
Sometimes I am angry.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, sometimes I am angry, but it is hard because sometimes it just shuts down conversations, and more often than not, I'm like, I'm not angry, I'm just anxious. And I feel like anxiety comes across in anger in a lot of Black women, and that's not something that's fully understood, but that's also a stereotype, you know, like, you're just angry or you're aggressive, or, like, we've had certain people not provide us service because they say that I'm too aggressive, and I'm like, you've never met me. Like, how are you saying that I'm aggressive when you can't even have a conversation with me? Am I aggressive, or are you just scared?
Yeah, no, you're definitely not aggressive or you're kind and caring.
I mean, I feel like there's a time and a place for aggressiveness. Like, there are some, when you're not being heard by, you know, your municipal government or your provincial or federal government or certain systems that are in place, there is a time for aggressiveness, because sometimes, and it's never the first step. It's never like, I'm gonna be extremely angry with you and yell at you and be upset or protest, you know? That's never the first step. The first step is usually, let's sit down and talk about this. Let's have a conversation. I'm gonna send you an email. But it's once we've been consistently silenced, that's when the aggressiveness is needed, because it'll be the same cycle over and over again.
Yeah, tone policing. Yeah, tone.
Yeah, and tone policing, yeah. Yeah, if you just say this in a nicer way, man, Google it. Don't ask me, just Google it.
Why are you so uncomfortable?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so valid, like the anger. You know, the online community is super toxic, right? And so I was just burnt out and right angry. And they're still the ones that have to want to listen to you.
It's true. And like, I don't totally come out of online like comment sections and everything. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just taking a break, but it is really toxic, and it was really draining my mental health. So I had to take a step back out of that. And I mean, there's space for all types of activism and advocacy. So I mean, like, if there are people can be in those spaces and make an impact, but I'm just not the one. Like, I cannot. Just seeing the comments and how hurtful, like, not even like just like mean and hurtful, it really bothers me to see that. And it's just a whole other ball game. It's like the person that you're talking to, it's like, would you truly talk to me like that in person? Like, if you saw me face to face, like, and if you do, that's an issue. Like, that's a huge issue. But just the way that people feel so emboldened to say the harmful rhetoric is, yeah, it really impacted me a lot.
It's tough too, because the majority would, you know, still that you run into.
Yeah, especially if they feel like targeted or maybe like backed into a corner or something like that. Yeah.
Typically just pales or comes back to the white supremacist patriarchal culture of today. How does it feel to challenge it so heavily?
I feel a lot more confident now. I feel a lot more confident in what I'm saying, and I feel a lot more confident in my strategy, and just knowing, like, getting familiar with different types of personalities as well, and knowing how, you know, you might be able to speak to this person in this way and they'll still be receptive, but you can't do it to this person in that way because it'll shut the conversation down. But it's still scary. Like, it's still scary, and especially like when I already have my own unlearning to do with my own thought processes, like fear of failure, fear of rejection. I have ADHD too, so rejection sensitivity dysphoria is real. So just learning how to, I've learned how to navigate the conversation. So I feel a lot better in that way, yeah.
How did you find your voice?
I just got thrown into it. Like, see how Brad left? That's what he does. And he's like, you got this, Tigra. And because I was so scared of like messing up. But there was so much learning, and there still is so much learning to do. But yeah, Brad was a really great form of support, and he really helped with helps with my imposter syndrome, and like he is really good at giving me that push and saying, you already know what to say, you don't need to write anything down, you don't, just come from the heart and it will flow. So yeah.
The process of unlearning.
Yeah, process definitely of unlearning. Like it runs so deep, and even white supremacy, it runs so deep, it's so prevalent, and you're just like, when the thought comes across your mind and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right anymore. It's that part that really hits home for me, like, because nobody's perfect, and yeah, doing that unlearning in ourselves is the most important, so that we can better help the community.
Of course. I was reading Bell Hooks. It blew my mind. It blew my mind. I don't think a book has ever done that, like, that level.
Which one did you read?
Men, Love, and Masculinity.
Oh, I have not read that one.
Oh, it blew my brain.
I've read Bell's Hooks books, and they are really, really good. Yeah.
No, I was like, oh, like
You should send that to me after so I can read it. We also, like, LVE does a book club. We have a monthly book club. It's all virtual. I've kind of stepped back from that just because I was working full time, doing outreach, taking care of my kids. I had a lot on my plate, so I was like, I need to take a step back from this. But my friend Darlene, she lives in Edmonton, so she leads that book club now. And yeah, we meet every month. And we've read some of Bell Hooks books, and yeah, they're really good.
Oh, feminist masculinity
Okay.
is what she introduces.
Okay.
So removing patriarchal masculinity for feminist masculinity.
We come from this society where, you know, the single income household, and, you know, the man goes to work and makes all the money and then comes back and takes care of everything, where living in a single income household now is next to impossible. So we have to work, but then we're also expected to work, but then take care of everything else. And it's like, okay, why on your end do you think that just making money is enough to bring to the table, and then you don't have to do anything else? Like, that's the part that really, like, patriarchy in a whole, there was so much unlearning to do there, and then so much relearning to do, and just being able to see it from different points of view too was really hard to navigate.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I've only known from like my male perspective. Like, I obviously can't speak on it, but I can speak on the unlearning aspect and how much I didn't know that I didn't know.
Right. Yeah.
Or just how many like words
Yeah.
that are like rooted in anti-woman speech. I'm still like, I read it a few months ago, and like I'm still like,
I want to read that book, and then I'm going to recommend it to all my friends. Read this.
Crazy how it like attacks masculinity, but also not only says this is a problem, it's like this is how we can fix it.
Yeah.
That's what I really liked about it. 'Cause I was like, whoa.
The solution, I feel like, a lot of conversations, the solution is missing, but it's also hard to even picture what a feminist world would look like, just because all of our systems are deeply rooted in patriarchy. So it's like, even when I think of a process, it's just like, is this a feminist process, or is this just because I'm so used to thinking patriarchally? Yeah.
That's what's so great about so many cultures, though, is they are matriarchal in nature and in tradition. It's definitely reconnecting with those roots. And I don't know, I think it'd be much more full of love.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
connection with community.
Yeah.
Because there is that like that greed, like inherent in the patriarchy, and it's so gross.
Yeah, it's true. Like, is everything separate, or does everything stem from capitalism and patriarchy? Like, is this all just is racism, like, is that a byproduct of capitalism?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. You know what? I think so, because racism as a whole, like dividing humans into races, is just a great way, as you said earlier, to divide and conquer. And so we're not really looking at the main problem, because we're looking at these other problems. Because in marginalized groups, it's really hard to come together because everyone's so stuck in comparisons.
Yeah.
You find it often like,
yes,
we have it worse than you do.
Oh man, and being Black and Indigenous, that is the most awkward conversation to have. Like, well, Indigenous people had it worse. I'm like, how can you compare trauma? How can you compare those injustices? Like, to me, that's unfathomable.
Well, you're comparing it, but it was caused by the same group. So instead of pointing your fingers at this group here, right? Like say this is the group, and instead of us pointing fingers, it's like
Yeah,
right there.
that's
it's right there,
yeah.
right in plain sight. And
Yeah.
we're stuck in this argument, and it's common with all like minorities or marginalized groups.
Somebody said this to me once. They said, well, we should do social justice differently, because like, how do we tell an unhoused white man who's, like needing money and food, you know, like how do we tell them that they're better off, you know? But if we find that commonality and like just show like we shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves, we should be fighting with that person there, I think that it would make social justice a lot easier to navigate. Yeah.
Well, that's why equity is so important. It's understanding that the needs of your general white man, as opposed to say you're an indigenous or even like black person, like it's so different. Like
It's
each
so
issue is
different.
so complicated, and having to unpack the issues.
It's like, how do you compare oppressions? Yeah.
It's wild.
It
Especially,
is. It's a lot.
I think what it comes back to is oppression based off skin color is just so wild. It's just so wild.
It is, yeah.
Because you quite literally don't have any control over that whatsoever.
No, exactly. We actually had a girl like last winter. She lived just outside of Lloyd, but east, and she went to like, I guess they had like a wood burning stove or something. She went out, it was like a snowstorm or whatever. She went out to get wood and she didn't go back. And so her family called 911 trying to fill out a missing persons report. They're like, we don't know. She literally just went to go and get wood. We don't know what happened. And they kept bringing up, you know, oh, she's darker skinned, she must be Métis. And they're like, no, she's not Métis. They just kept bringing that up. And then after they had come to that notion, they're like, oh, she must be out with her friends drinking or partying. She was like, they found her close to her house, dead, and just from getting wood. But it's like they stopped themselves in their tracks based on the color of their skin that they were wrong about, you know? So it's like that type of like systemic racism within the like RCMP is not only now hindering us, but like white people as well.
Oh, Bell Hooks said something about love and violence can't coexist.
Right.
Like if you say you love someone but you act violently towards them, you don't truly love them.
Yeah.
Because you haven't properly worked enough on yourself to allow yourself to actually truly experience love if you're still acting violently.
Right.
I think is the gist of what she said, but I can't be concerned. It's been a while since
Yeah. Is that from that same book?
Yeah, like most of that
I need
is.
to read this book.
She does talk a lot about war and violence. The tricky thing is though, is there's a lot of men who like try to speak for women instead of like holding that space for women.
Yeah.
Like they confuse the two.
Yeah.
I guess you find that with Indigenous and Black people.
I think that's what supremacy, like when you're in that position of privilege, like you should hold that space for other people whose voices are silenced. I was having that conversation with my brothers, like, what is mansplaining?
Like what you were talking about earlier, that finding that honesty with yourself to have those hard conversations and to allow yourself to actually be wrong. And then it's like, especially when you're like deconstructing the patriarchal thinking, a non-male tell you that you're wrong and how you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then actually listening and actually having like your walls and your guards down to actually like hear it and listen to it and then let yourself work with it.
Yeah. And that's the same thing with racism and being anti-racist too. I feel. Yeah.
To be able to continue hearing it too and like listening to it and like be like, okay, like I'm not gonna be acting in the right way, in the right manner, at the right time every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And being accountable, like that piece is so necessary, the accountability piece.
Why it's important to have
Representation.
representation, but also initiatives led by those same marginalized groups to help or to have that lens.
It's true. Like the majority of the people that we serve and we see on a daily basis are Indigenous peoples, but even people falling below the poverty line, like they're marginalized as well. Like classism is such a huge issue, and I feel like not just here, but in many communities, like across, I guess, like wherever capitalism is prevalent, poverty and addiction is criminalized. Like, you know, and we even see it in the child welfare system where, you know, if you're poor and you have kids, the government and child social services will take your kids from you, but then they'll also pay a foster parent to mind your child for you, which is super strange to think about when it's like, why not just pay the parent? You know, just give them the money that they need to adequately take care of their children.
Never thought about that. I don't know why I've never thought about that, but I've never thought about that.
And it's completely like, it's like that, but on a whole other level, especially with Indigenous communities and wanting to take the child out of their community, out of kinship care and place them with white families. And it's just, you know, residential schools, but on a whole different form, in a whole different way. And at the end of the day, it's still doing what the colonizers wanted to do when they came here, which was take the Indian out of the child, right? So I feel like the systematic racism that Indigenous and like BIPOC have faced is truly the reason why we do have that disproportional rate of Indigenous peoples to non-Indigenous peoples on the streets. And the lack of wanting to have that understanding of why the home life is so disconnected, why addiction is prevalent, why mental illness is prevalent, really does a disservice in itself, because you're not able to view from that lens of empathy and from that lens of how, other than throwing money at the issue, which is never the answer, how can we help support and rebuild things that were lost, but in a culturally sensitive way? And that doesn't mean like swooping in as a white savior and saying like, I can help you when you can't. You know, using the privilege to put the people in power or to create the space that can adequately, and putting the ego aside and the self aside, to put people in the space where they then themselves can adequately help the community.
Worst thing I hear, oh sorry, I rose my voice, I didn't mean to, is like, your people are so uncivilized.
Oh my God, yeah.
I hear that so often. That's
Yeah.
because like me and my mom, we eat raw meat, specifically to like our regions, but like why don't you eat like civilized people? Or like, you know, you hear like most people of color hear that all the time, right? Like, like you're a savage. It's like, you're the ones killing us.
Literally though.
You're the ones stealing our people. You're
Yeah.
the ones killing our culture. You're the ones who have burned like our records and our histories and our traditions and our cultures. And you're the ones calling us savages. Like,
Seriously.
look in the mirror.
Yeah. It's like when they, like, slave holders would call slaves lazy. Like, I'm doing all your field work. Like, who's lazy?
Yep. Yeah. That's it doesn't make sense.
It is. I know, it does not make sense. In Florida, they're teaching their middle school grades now that slavery, yeah.
There were benefits.
There were benefits.
For slaves.
Yeah. But they do that here too with
Or
residential
enslaved,
schools.
sorry,
There were
enslaved.
benefits to residential schools, and it's like, no.
How tired of you of having people follow you around the store?
I boycotted stores for that reason. And then you try and say something about it, and people are like, oh no, they're just trying to help you. They're not trying to help me. They legit think I'm stealing. They are not trying to help me at all.
Or how tired of you too when there's security at these stores and they let everyone else walk by, and then you come up and they're like, all of a sudden like, I gotta do my job.
Can I check your receipt? Because if you say anything, it just makes it worse. If you say anything, then you're the aggressor.
It's so
Yeah,
annoying.
it happens everywhere. I find like I walked in and she's like, oh, do you need help with anything? I was like, no, I've been here a billion times. I don't need help with anything. And then like I went to the back wall, and I was like looking at something, and I turned around and I realized she was like right behind me, like pretending to do whatever she was doing, and I just walked out.
You ever get the, here, let me bring it
Yes,
to the front.
yes, I get that all the time too. Let me bring it to the front.
And you're
Yeah.
like, am I not capable?
There to like the self-checkout. They're usually, it depends who's there. Like if there's other brown people there, then they're on them too. But if we're the only brown people, they're on us. Like,
I was checking water meters. So you walk around with like these orange vests. And
Yeah.
You have like this meter and a book, it's called, that connects to the meter to check the. I got big work boots on and everything, and I'm checking. And sometimes you kind of have to go into like people's backyards.
Yeah.
Just to check the meter.
yeah,
And I mean, no one's ever questioned it because I've been the work here, and they tell the people too before.
right.
They're like, be ready around this time for your water meter check, like around this week. And so I go into this guy's backyard, and I just reach down to check the water meter, and the next thing you know, I just see the door kicked open with like I got, and I'm like, oh my god.
Serious?
Yeah, and so, but my coworkers were in the back doing a sewer line. They were clearing a sewer line, so we
Right.
couldn't really hear nothing, right? The guy starts like apologizing like crazy because I don't like check your water meter, and he was like, "Oh, you're trying to steal from me. I had some steal from me like last week."
That's what insurance is for.
Yeah,
That is so scary.
yeah,
My husband, like, he won't go on like farmers' lands at all. Like, I feel really uncomfortable going
So
on
valid.
any rural property, like, at all.
that guy in Saskatchewan, the farmer chased down
Yeah.
those guys, and
Yeah.
Nothing.
And that's like, my husband's name is Aaron, and he went to go pick up like it was like a flatbed. He was moving something, and somebody was like, yeah, you can come and grab it, like, come onto my property. And I guess the neighbor saw him, and like my husband's best friend is black, and they saw them, and he just came out like really mad, like, what are you doing? Like, was questioning them. They felt so uncomfortable, like, and he's like, I'll never go onto land like that ever again. And last year, I was doing a walk for addictions and overdose awareness. We walked from Bonnyville to Edmonton, and we stopped in a driveway, and it was me, my two friends, my friend's partner, and their baby. Like, she was only one. And so we were like pulled over. We were getting snacks and water, just trying to get situated to hit the road again. And the guy came in. I guess the driveway was so long. Like, the house was like a kilometer away from the road. And he's like, what are you doing here? And we were trying to explain like what we were doing. He's like, well, it doesn't look really good that you're here and I'm not home. I'm like, we didn't know you weren't home because we weren't paying attention to that. We're just trying to like get on the road again. And he just like went off. Like, he was being so rude and disrespectful. And then Gord, like my friend's partner, called him out for being racist. And so we're like, okay, let's like hurry up and get on the road. And so we started walking, and Gord was driving the truck. So there was like a truck stop up here that he went to, and the guy like switched vehicles and like drove by him, and then he must have seen the baby because he was like, oh, you're lucky, and then he drove away. My story is an interesting one. So my mom is Jamaican. She was actually born in Jamaica. She came here when she was about 12, and she has 5 siblings. And my dad is Indigenous. He's like Cree and Métis. His mom's from Big Stone Cree Nation, and his dad was from East Prairie Métis settlement. And so yeah, they met in Alberta, in Edmonton, and then they had me. But they were both suffering from their own addiction, and I was born addicted to drugs, but also my siblings. Like, I have 2 half siblings. They were both born addicted to drugs as well. And we didn't meet until way later in life. Like, I thought they were both adopted out, and like my grandmother, so my mom's mother adopted me, but she wasn't able to adopt. Like, she already had 5 of her own plus me, so 6 kids. And but I did get to meet my sister. My brother actually was adopted, so his name was changed and everything. And getting any sort of information from my mom is really, really hard. So I was raised in Ontario, but the household was like, it was riddled with trauma, like physical trauma, mental trauma, emotional trauma, abuse. And it was, and in hindsight now, I also had ADHD, I was neurodivergent, like dealing with all of this, trying to operate in a world that wasn't created for me. So I just had like, right from the get-go, a lot of like behaviors that weren't quote unquote normal. And I really struggled in school. I really struggled a lot in school, and like one of the things I heard most was like, you're so smart, if only you applied yourself. And it's like, if you only knew what I was going through at home, then maybe you would understand why I'm not able to function and pay attention in class. So school was a huge struggle for me, and it wasn't until like the end of high school, kind of like grade 10, 11, grade 10, 11-ish. I started like taking drugs, but it was at that point, like every addict, it was just recreational. Probably about like 16, 17, that's when I started to like drink and use drugs. And I just remember getting in trouble a lot. Like my household was like, love was very conditional. Like you had to, and it was extremely conservative and Christian. So you had to like act a certain way, look a certain way, think a certain way in order to feel like love, basically. And being like, thinking outside the box, you know, like being neurodivergent, being queer, like that was just like no on all levels. And I never felt like, I just felt like me fundamentally was wrong. Like there was something wrong with me. And it just made the dynamic was just very, very like rigid, but then also very like hostile. And so when I left home, I remember this day like clearly. I was sleeping and my grandmother came down. Yeah, trigger warning, there's like lots of abuse here. So in all fairness, like I had stolen something and I drank it. So yeah, that part, like I did do that part, but they were trying to blame me for something that I didn't do. And I was like, I didn't do this. Like they had bought something that got stolen because they left their car unlocked. And I was like, that wasn't me. And she was hiding, you know, like PVC pipe, but like stuff like under your sink. So I got brutally beaten with that. Like half of my body was black and blue. And I remember like I was wearing these shorts that were way too big for me for some reason. And I just remember grabbing a sweater and tying it around my waist and like leaving. And I was like, I literally ran for my life. And the way that it was set up, like my house was set up, was the front door locked with a key from the inside. So I got to the top of the stairs and I was like, please say it's open, like please be open, please be open, please be open. And it was open. And I just like ran, I ran and I called a relative and I was like, they kind of knew what was going on, like, but kind of not really. Like when you grow up in an environment like that, it's almost like you get Stockholm syndrome, because I don't know, like in hindsight, like I wish little Tigra would have said something to like somebody, but I also don't feel, also in hindsight, I see how like me and my siblings like slipped through that crack as well. And I don't know where that stems from, but anyways, so I called a relative and he came and got me, and I stayed with them for a bit, but it was also like super Christian, conservative household, and they had come out here to Edmonton for a vacation, And we were only supposed to be there for 10 days, but I was like, I'm not going back. Like, there's no way that I'm going back there. And I had left my childhood home before, but then also always made it back. And I feel like it is that like Stockholm type syndrome. It's super weird. Like, trauma is really hard to unpack because it's like, I love you, but I hate you, like, and then it's like you kind of want to get to this place of forgiveness. I don't know. It's super weird. It's a really weird dynamic. Anyways, so I ended up in Edmonton in 2008, and I was unhoused, just like sleeping on couches, like reconnected with family, ended up going to stay with them. But I always had very like risk-taking behaviors, and for a plethora of reasons, like trauma and abuse, but also ADHD at the same time. So I never really felt comfortable or supported or seen wherever I was. Like, building relationships was very hard, maintaining relationships was very hard, maintaining a job was extremely hard. And there was always that level. Now, in hindsight, I recognize that it was addiction, regardless if it was like daily use or binge use. But there always came a point in time where I was using to the point where like I couldn't work, or it was affecting like my everyday life. So in 2010, in 2010, I met like the father of my oldest child, and it was just like a fiery relationship, like right off the bat. Like, we were just like, we consumed each other. And I eventually got pregnant, and I had to stop drinking and like using, and I realized that he was not stopping, and that he started hiding it, which was really weird to me. And I was like, okay, like this is clearly a bigger issue than I even like realized. But the relationship was extremely tumultuous, and we ended up breaking up, and I was a single mom. And I had to, so when she was born, my oldest was born, I ended up having to go to work. Like, she was only 3 months old when I had to go back to work, because EI was only paying me $598 a month, and my rent was $600. But I got this basement suite. It was like a 1-bedroom. It was a huge 1-bedroom, full kitchen, washer, dryer, everything for $600, all utilities included. It was awesome. But I couldn't even afford that, and like all my money had to go towards rent. That didn't include, my transportation, my food, any extra expenses, daycare, right? So I ended up messing that up. Her dad had come over, and we drank a lot, and we ended up getting into a huge fight, and I ended up getting evicted from that place. And I had to move back in with his parents, which was super weird. It was a very weird dynamic. And so I lived there for a bit. He went to jail, and when he was coming out, he said, like, I don't want her there anymore. So I had to leave, and ended up moving in with another family member. And at that point, like, my drug use had just like evolved. Like, I would go weeks without using, and then when I did, it was just like life shattering. Like, my whole paycheck would go towards using, and that weekend, and then come Monday, like, it was hard for me to get back to work, and I had so much guilt and regret about spending all that money that I should have been using for like other things. And so in 2013, I went to treatment, and I went to Poundmaker's Lodge, and that was like the beginning of my recovery journey. And that was a really great treatment program. I did not take it seriously. Like I was 2 weeks away from like graduating, and I ended up getting kicked out because I got into a relationship with somebody in there. That's a huge no-no, and now I know why. But it was really good because it gave me the tools that I needed to start that journey or like pick it back up when I needed it. So like I learned what a meeting was. I had no idea what a meeting was. Learned what a meeting was, what a sponsor was, like, you know, not giving up after relapsing, like those types of skills. So, but I didn't last, like my clean time did not last at all. Like I think I was only out for 2 weeks before I relapsed again. And then, but I always I was like, okay, you know what? Like this isn't the end all be all. I'm going to try and get clean. But it didn't click. And I just fell into the same routines and the same patterns. And the beginning of 2014, things are such a blur there, like that in that time frame. But the beginning of 2014, I got evicted from my place. I had people in there that took over my house. And I remember just like leaving with Summer. I was like, I'm gonna go on a liquor run. Like I told everyone I was gonna go on a liquor run, and I took Summer. And I don't know how familiar you are with Edmonton, but like I live right off of White Avenue, and on White Avenue there's like an A&W there. And I remember going there and like calling a relative, and I was like, can you come and pick up Summer? I'm gonna get emotional and I'm really, really sorry. But I'm like, all right, can you come and pick up Summer? Like, it's not safe. It's not safe here where she is. And they came and got her, and that was like the beginning of me being unhoused. And in hindsight, like I made the best decision I could have made for her, because social services wasn't involved at that time. I had made that decision, and it could have been so much worse than it was if I hadn't. So yeah, but it also, like, I dealt with so much shame from not having her, and I beat myself up so much about like being like a crappy parent, and like doing her such a disservice by keeping her in an environment that was so unsafe for her. And like anything could have happened, anything could have gone wrong, and I'm so thankful to Creator that it didn't. But I dealt with a lot of shame, and I know that a lot of women that I see and I work with also deal with that as well. So yeah, it fueled my fire, and I was just, I had this like all or nothing mentality. Like I swear I was like, I'm never getting clean. I'm most likely gonna die on the streets. Like I did, like, I just did a lot of things that now in hindsight, like I would have never done. And so in 2015, I met Aaron. This is like a recovery story, and like that I would never recommend this to anybody, because I don't know why and how it worked for me, but somehow things just aligned at the right time. And I was staying with this couple in the West Edmonton Motor Inn, and things were getting super hostile, and I was like, I have to get out of here. Like, it's not safe for me here. So I walked over to West Edmonton Mall, and I don't exactly know what I was doing there. And I was gonna head back downtown, and I saw this guy sitting. Do you know where the Fantasyland Hotel is? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know how they have like that circle bench? So he was sitting there, and I was like, I'm gonna ask him for the time. I don't know. And I was like, do you have the time? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting stood up on a date. I don't know why, whatever made me say this, but I was like, I got stood up on a date, and I bummed a smoke from him. And he lived here in Lloyd, and he was on days off, and he was like trying to like get people together to go party at this hotel. But the Fantasyland was full, and I was like, I know all the hotels in this area. Why don't we go to this one? We'll go check this one out. Or you should go. And I was like, I'm going to go back here, or I can come and party with you. So we ended up partying together that weekend, and I don't know what had come over me, because like at that time I was still so ashamed of everything that I wasn't really forthcoming, and I just like laid everything out for him. I was like, I'm like heavily addicted to meth and alcohol. Like I have a daughter that I want to get custody of. Like I need to get her back. Like I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like it was winter time, and like being unhoused in the winter is just a whole other experience. And so he brought me back to Lloyd. And it was a really, really rocky start. Like I relapsed. I went back to Edmonton, and I had relapsed there. And then I relapsed again, but with alcohol, and I ended up getting a DUI, like, and his truck impounded. And it was really funny because like multiple people were like, be careful of girls like that. Like you're gonna wake up one day and all you're gonna be gone. And that's what happened. Like when he woke up and all his stuff was gone, I was in a holding cell. So it kind of did happen, but he was just like really patient with me, and he's a really big part of my recovery story. When I first moved to Lloyd, Summer's grandparents, they had told me like, well, we want to get interim guardianship of her because we can't make any decisions like for her, and we want to, get her into kindergarten or like play school, and we want to be able to do things like that. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But when I got the paperwork that they wanted me to sign, they were trying to take all of my rights away from me as a parent. And it was really sad because somebody that I was really, really close with wrote a letter in support of that, saying that I shouldn't have custody of Summer because I wasn't going to be a good parent. So it was kind of like, I felt kind of like if I didn't know better to read the paperwork before signing it, and I think they were counting on me not reading it, then I could have like given away all my rights to being a parent, and I felt wronged by that. But anyways, so we had to go to court for that, and that was when our court process had started. My court process had started for custody of Summer and the interim guardianship, which they did get, because I still wasn't ready to parent or be a parent at that time. And I did agree with the interim guardianship. I just didn't agree with me signing over my rights as a parent. And when we first started, I could see Summer every other week for 4 hours in Edmonton. And I didn't drive, I didn't have a license, so Aaron would drive me in every other weekend for 4 hours to see Summer. And then afterwards, like it would have to be at her grandparents' house, and then I could have it at my sister-in-law's house. It still had to be supervised visitation, but not at their house. And the relationship between myself and her grandparents was just extremely rocky at that point. And so after I had the supervised visitation at the family member's house, then we could bring her back to Lloyd, which was like, it was such a great feeling. And like just to see like the steps that were in motion because of the recovery process was really cool to see. And I was really grateful for that. And it made, like, the relationship started to get better between me and her grandparents, or else they would have never allowed that. And then in 2017, it was like out of the blue. I didn't know like how to ask for her back, which was super weird. But the relationship was just so good at that point that I didn't want to do anything to hinder that. But it was out of the blue, and her grandpa was like, well, you're doing a lot better now. Do you want to have Summer back? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I did want to have her back, and I was so happy, like so happy, but also really scared at the same time of like messing it up. Like I was like, and I still have like a fear of failure. I didn't want it. Like, I have a fear of failure, and I was scared to fail. But I didn't, and I went on to have 2 more kids after that. And I'm really grateful that my babies, like, they never, like, the younger 2 have never seen me drunk. They've never seen me high, you know, like, and I'm really grateful that they're in an environment where that's how it is now. Like, there's such a huge change from then until now. And but when I was unhoused in Edmonton, there was services that I had there that weren't necessarily available here. And just having that lived experience, I wanted to bring, and how much I appreciated those services, I wanted to bring that here to Lloyd. So that's how I ended up doing street team and bringing that here, and in a model that was just out in the community, meeting people where they're at.
That's a beautiful story of resilience.
Thanks.
And thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
You got your daughter back.
Yeah, and like Tyler now has this house here called the Healing House, and women can go there and heal with their kids. And it's like, I wish that, I'm so grateful that they get that opportunity, because that guilt and that shame, like when you rip like that family apart, and it's not a realistic way to recover as well, because your kids, like, they're a test on your patience and like they bring a whole different dynamic to the household, that taking them away out of the household isn't it's not a real environment of that person's recovery and what that might look like. So the fact that they can recover here in this house together, when I heard that opening, I definitely cried, because I wish that I had that opportunity, but I'm really, really grateful for these moms that they get to have that opportunity here.
Well, if kids see you in using, like active use, they should be able to see you in active recovery. Mm-hmm. Show them, you know, if they stray from their path, they can find their way back.
And you can be honest with them, because like when I was in treatment or when I was on the streets, like they just said like, oh, Mom's sick. And it's like, yeah, I'm sick, but there's so much more to it than just being sick. And now like this is something I have to prepare my kids for, because it is intergenerational, and because like Summer did grow up in that environment of trauma as well and neglect, that I do now that's my responsibility to inform her and pay attention and be aware and look for signs and just be open with her. Yeah. And my other kids too, but they're just tiny.
So how did you overcome that immense shame that you dealt with early in your journey?
Like at first, I think it was like, I could not continue like being on the streets. Like I would have ended up dead. Like the amount of situations I put myself in where no one knew where I was, and like I was in rooms with people I did not know, and like I didn't have a phone, I had no communication. And like we've heard it, like Amber Tuckero, like she was in a hotel that I used to stay at when she was unalived and like disappeared. So like I knew that I wanted to be around for Summer, and I was just tired. I was just like the exhaustion, like you can't put into words, and it's not something that you can explain either. Like to be like, you're on your feet 24/7. The shin splints were real. You're on your feet 24/7. You're hungry. You're dehydrated. Like you're just exhausted, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I just could not do it anymore, and but the shame piece never really disappeared, because I still blame myself for a lot of things while I was recovering, and that's a piece of recovery that, you know, doesn't really, I guess it does get spoken about, but recovery kind of gets glorified in a way, like early recovery. And that part of recovery is the hardest because all of those emotions, all of those situations, and all of those feelings that you were desperately trying to not feel, you have to feel them. And whatever you went through during your active addiction, you haven't fully healed from it until you get sober and clean. So just having that grace for myself and putting myself in a situation where I had like-minded people around me, and therapy really, that really helped navigate that feeling of shame, and just understanding that having that feeling over me does me a disservice and also my children a disservice, because I can't be my true authentic self if I'm constantly blaming myself for the past.
It can be so hard to let go of.
It is really hard. And then healing's not linear either. So it's like sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And then sometimes something will get brought up that'll trigger something from the past. And then you have to deal with that all over again. But now, like, I'm capable of using them as teaching moments, like teachable moments. Like, okay, you already thought you went through this, but obviously there's something else that you're supposed to be learning from this. And yeah, so it's not linear, and I'm always going back and forth with it.
I find those little deals you make with yourself to be tough. You know, like if this happens, I don't want to use again. Like,
Yeah.
those
Oh,
still
yeah. That's how I relapsed, like the first time, like when I went to go and see Summer, and I don't know how, like, first of all, my license was expired and I should not have been driving, but Aaron didn't know that, and I didn't know that either because I forgot. I didn't have the actual license card on me, and I was like, it'll be fine, let me just use your truck. So I went to Edmonton to go and see Summer, and I went in on the wrong day, and when I realized it was the wrong day, I called to see if it was still okay if I saw her, and they said no. And immediately used that as an excuse to use. And I went to my old stomping grounds, and I was like, this is what I'm doing now. I already didn't feel well going into the city. Edmonton still triggers me being in certain areas of it. So I already didn't feel well going into the city, and then that happened. So it was just like a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
What do you think, if you could pick one lesson from your journey that has been the most impactful on you, what would you say it is?
I think that it still comes down to honesty, because regardless, like, I feel like things would have gone in a different direction if I was just honest with myself and the people around me. And but communication is also a really good one. Can I have two?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Honesty and communication. And yeah, if I could have communicated my needs better, if I could have communicated my needs better, I think that the experience would have gone in a different way. And and obviously, like in recovery, being honest with yourself and being able to communicate your needs and what you're feeling is also really important.
So the worst part about hindsight is thinking about how you could have done it differently. But you didn't have the tools back then.
Communication is such a big one, like especially coming from childhood trauma. It's like something I'm still working on to this day, and like especially in conflict, or like this just happened, like I was really upset with something that somebody did, but I was afraid to address it because I didn't want to make them feel bad. So communication, I feel like communication is one we could all use work on.
Even if that conflict is like little,
Yeah.
like really, like a really small thing, like addressing it, like,
Yeah.
because that little small thing, like,
It does,
snowball.
yeah.
Crazy story. That's crazy. You should write a book one day.
People keep saying that. And then Brad's like, yeah, I told you should write a book. It's like it's his idea first. But that's something on my bucket list, is to write a book.
The hardest part is starting.
The biracial experience is also a whole other topic of conversation. Even in my own household, like they would talk about the Black experience but never include me in that experience. Like, we talk about Black people, but you're not Black. Black hair, but your hair's not Black. Like, I was always excluded from that. So, but that's an experience that I know that it's not just like for me. Like that element of being biracial is prevalent within that community. Not knowing where to fit in and having that identity crisis. Yeah, and then also having to recognize like light skin privilege too because of colorism.
How is your reconnection journey come into play there?
I think that I had and am having a hard time like knowing where to start.
Language is what I always say to start.
Yeah, language.
Tansei.
Yeah.
Beakwitch.
What do you speak up north? Like, what language is that?
Dog rib is what the Dene speak there.
Okay.
And then there's Tlicho, and then Inuit speak, my people speak Inuinnaqtun, but then there's also Inuktitut, which is the more common tongue.
Oh, okay, okay.
So it's spread out.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. Some of the words are mixed up. Like our word for mom is the Inuktitut word for boobs.
That's funny.
Yeah, so there's only a few thousand left who speak Inuinnaqtun, but there's a whole bunch of like Inuktitut speakers. So, yeah, like Cree too. There's so many different dialects. Plains, swampy,
Yeah.
northern.
Woodland.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here, like, it's Plains Cree, but where my dad is from, it's Woodland Cree. So if I do want to go to that reserve, I feel like that would help with the reconnection journey, to go there and like see the community.
Whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I don't know, I'm mixed, but I'm mixed with white. So but I grew up like in the culture because my mother's Inuk, right? And so my biggest problem wasn't not being immersed in it; it was accepting it. And I had Elf Angels. They told me actually because I've been in the process of reconnecting because I stepped away from it for a long time during my own addiction journey. But it was like, you know, through my sobriety and unraveling who it was that I wanted to be, to figure out who it was that I needed to be. At the core of that was reconnection, like with myself, and that included culture. And I always had a bit of a barrier with that, you know, like the same question, like, you know, most mixed people struggle with is, am I indigenous enough?
Yeah.
Right? Am I enough? And, you know, you, on another level, you probably, like, am I Black enough? Like, you probably ask yourself too. And, you know, I was at that reading with Elf Angels.
Did he read your Akashic records?
No. I just did the feather reading, and
Nice.
he goes, he's like, they're telling you that you're too colonized. It's okay. Like by, like, you know, blood quantum and, you know, like spirituality, you're still enough.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, that rocked me. I was like,
You're
whoa.
too colonized.
Yeah, like, because, you know, we were doing an interview with the Aniskum Center, which is the Mount Royal Indigenous Services Center, and, you know, they were talking a lot about, you know, it's common to hear about decolonization, but you don't really hear too often about indigenizing.
Yeah.
And so one comes before the other.
Right.
And so first you have
Decolonizing and then indigenizing.
Yeah.
Ah.
So it's deconstructed, and you gotta replace it, right?
Right.
And so, you know, it made sense at the time when I heard it, but it didn't click until I heard I was too colonized, because I was like, you know, I've been trying to decolonize myself, but I've been trying to indigenize myself.
That just gave me like full body chills. That is really cool. Yeah, yeah.
I hope that helps. If it does a bit. It blew my brain too. I was like, whoa.
It is scary though, because there's the people that question your indigeneity and like your blood quantum, like who's your parents, like who's your parents' parents, where are they from, like who were their parents, like it's that part is scary.
Especially as Afro-Indigenous, you statistically face the highest amounts of lateral violence in both communities.
Yeah, but I feel like regardless of like what color we are, like we get trapped in these silos where we just hear the confirmation bias that validates what we're thinking. I feel like for me it's I gaslight myself a lot, and I think of like others who have had it worse, and then I like make myself think that it wasn't as bad as it actually was because other people have had it worse. So
Survivor's guilt.
Huh?
Survivor's guilt?
Yeah, literally survivor's guilt. And I think, that's what, I feel like that's the hardest part for me about, like, I don't feel like worthy enough to share my story because others have had it worse.
That's one of the reasons I stopped going to AA. NA I just found super weird.
That's why I like Smart Recovery. I like Smart Recovery because it's not 12-step based. And then Terry, actually, who came in here, I love her so much. She leads Wellbriety.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
like an indigenized.
Yeah. So she leads Wellbriety, and I haven't been to a Wellbriety meeting yet, and I definitely want to go and check it out. The only thing I don't necessarily like about Wellbriety is the separation between men and women.
A lot of like what you're saying, like the 12-step approach. I think it's amazing how much AA and NA have done. I just think it's built off like a humiliation approach that has people consistently humiliate themselves in front of others.
Okay.
To keep them sober. Like the idea is you give up power, right, to the higher power. So you're almost giving up the fact that you sobered up on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Christian based, right? And that's one of the foundations of Christianity, is that you're not in control of your own life. Like, it's God who's in control of your life. But I do agree with that, and like being like, even like going up to get chips too, like you go, like let's say you relapsed and then you go back to your same home meeting and then you have to start again. Like, you should still be resilient in your recovery, but I don't know, like I don't feel as like rigid around like slips or relapses anymore. Like, I don't feel like your recovery should just disappear because of a mistake or a slip, or however, maybe it wasn't a mistake, you literally went and just, but yeah, I guess it's just like, I don't know, my thought process on recovery has definitely really changed, and it's hard to put it into words.
It is. I don't think sobriety should define a person, just as addiction shouldn't define a person. And I think that for me personally, I want to be proud of myself for sobering up and not my higher power.
Yeah.
And then I also don't want my biggest mistakes to be the only thing keeping myself working towards the best version of myself.
Yeah.
I want my future to define me and not my past. I guess is what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all so much for listening to me and like giving me this space to share my story. And yeah, I guess like honestly, if I could encourage anyone to do something, it would be to look at support in another way, look at addiction in another way, and look at community capacity building in another more positive way.
Thank you for sharing all your knowledge, your time, and your story. It's been a blessing. That's it from us.
Thank
Local
you.
Lives.
Yeah.
My biggest mistakes to be the only thing